Hey everybody, Charles from GMAT Ninja here. Today we're going to talk about point of view questions in GMAT Reading Comprehension. So this is episode 2 in our 2026 live reading comprehension series. So yeah, live. So if you like watching middle-aged guys say dumb things on camera, you're in the right place because I have no idea what's going to come out of my mouth. So superficially, this whole series is built around question types for reading comprehension, and that's an unconventional way to do it. Plenty of other reading comprehension series we've done here on the GMATClub channel, GMAT Ninja YouTube channel. Little bit different. We're organizing it around question types, but that's kind of superficial. Really, the goal always on reading comprehension is to get you really great at your process for reading. Point of view and point of view questions are a really, really key dimension of that, which is why we're doing it early in the series. Making sure that you're really catching those little distinctions. You might see a passage where there's 2 or 3 different people's opinions. There's these scholars over here, this other scholar over here. Then there's the author kind of lurking a little bit. So we're going to try to pull that apart. I'm going to give you 2 passages today. I'm going to warm you up fairly gently. First passage, not crazy hard, and it's organized in a very conventional way. And if you're really focused on the points of view, even though they're not hidden, they're very obvious about it. If you stay nice and focused on that, you're going to slice right through those questions. It's going to make it so much more efficient for you. So we'll get you thinking about point of view in a nice, clean structure in the first passage today. Second passage, gloves off. It is brutal, my opinion. The stats say it's brutal. Stats say you guys really struggle on it. So we're going to make that second one really, really tough. Lots of points of view, so about 5 of them. If you don't know who I am, so I am, my name's Charles. I run a company called GMAT Ninja. I've been teaching for about 25 years. Lots of free stuff. So we have a full, free, complete GMAT video course. You want to check that out, go ahead. About 10 tutors. We've all been doing it for years and years and years. So if you need help beyond the free stuff, hit us up, check out our free course, then check us out on the website, GMATninja.com. All right, promo over. Let's get into the questions for today. First passage we're going to do on a famous British nurse named Florence Nightingale. As always, if you guys are watching this live, I thrive off your feedback. I'm seeing some familiar names popping up in the chat already. Thank you for that, you guys. What we always do in these, I'll give you the first paragraph only, and I want you to think about, okay, why? What points of view are represented? Why did the author write this? How might you kind of not summarize just the information, but the purpose of the paragraph, something like 8 to 12 words. If you're watching live, toss it into the chat, please. After that first paragraph, we'll come back. I'll tell you what my thinking on it looks like, do the second paragraph and so on, and then we'll jump into the questions after that. So if you're watching live, go ahead and take a minute or 2 on this first paragraph. And I'll get rid of that watermark. Give me a moment. All right, as always, pause if you need a little more time with this. If you're not watching this live, make sure you take as much time as you need to make sure you get your head around the paragraph before moving on. Okay, so as always with these, we're focused on purpose. Why is the author writing this as best we can? And again, if I've chosen passages deliberately that have multiple points of view, that's a really good way to help you kind of get at the author's view. So even if the author's view isn't stated, let's say in this first paragraph, if you start thinking structurally, you think about what's there, you think about whose points of view are represented, it's really going to set you up, make everything easier down the road. All right. So again, we're warming you up gently. They give you a nice, clean structure. What do we notice in this first paragraph? So first of all, it mentions right off the bat, we've got two different publications. So we've got 2 points of view, 2 different assessments of the career of this famous British nurse. So 2 assessments. And then this gets into that first view, right? So this Summers character, so Anne Summers has this book, and what is she saying? She's basically saying, hey, we're going to debunk the idealizations about Florence Nightingale. She has this heroic reputation. We're going to debunk that. So basically saying, yeah, she doesn't deserve this heroic idealized reputation. So we're going to say, we'll call it kind of viewpoint number 1, and this is Summers. And we're basically saying we're going to debunk the idealization and heroic reputation. Okay, well, what's her evidence? So why is this? Basically, it centers on the idea that in the Crimean War, Nightingale just wasn't as heroic as people thought, right? It didn't really accomplish that much. It didn't have that big of an impact. And that's the core of our argument. So if we're going to look at a point of view, so a lot of success on reading comprehension is about reading at the right depth, the right altitude. So if you dive too far in, you start obsessing over every little fact, you're going to miss the big picture, waste time. If you're too glib with it and just go, Summers, we're criticizing Nightingale, that's it. And live group, thank you so much for weighing in. I'm going to toss a couple of these on the board because I think this is super helpful. Yeah, I would want, and I realize you're tossing stuff into the comments, so this might not perfectly reflect your thinking. I'd argue, yes, this is correct. I would urge you to make sure that you understand the why. So why is Summers saying that reputation is over-exaggerated? The evidence for her is basically that during that Crimean War, the importance of her contributions was exaggerated. It was specifically, so Anne Summers' argument is specifically focused on what Nightingale didn't really accomplish during the war. So why? So we'll say war accomplishments exaggerated. Okay, and I think that's good enough for us to move forward. Now again, notice I'm always paying attention to that kind of thing when they say something like, hey, 2 publications, here's 1 assessment. Well, guess what's coming? I'm going to bet anything we're about to see the second one. And it's small things to pick up on that just help you go, okay, what's the author doing? The author's setting us up to see some sort of contrast between these 2 assessments. Here's the first one. Do I see the author's opinion yet? No, not yet. But we know the author is going to be contrasting these 2 in some way. All right, next paragraph, go ahead and take a moment. And again, same drill, try to get to that kind of nice, clean 8 to 12 word summary. Why is this here? What points of view are represented? And just as importantly, how does it connect to that first paragraph? All right, as always, if you need another minute, go ahead and take it. Okay, so again, I'm warming up gently, nice clean structure, nice contrasting points of view. So now we had 2 assessments that the author introduced in the first one, introduced the idea that there are 2, gave us the first one. Summers kind of saying, nah, this Nightingale thing, overblown. She didn't really do that much in the war. Okay, so here's view number 2. And it's the editors of her letters. So view number 2, this comes from her letters. And they're basically saying, yeah, I mean, hey, she influenced future generations. She did all this amazing stuff. She kind of deserves her place, right? Because she affected people not just of her own age, but subsequent generations. But notice here, so again, you want to dig a little deeper than just, oh, hey, Nightingale's great. And actually, I'm gonna pick on some of the guys watching live because I really appreciate this. Yes, excellent. Star Student, I really appreciate your participation in these 2 sessions. Love you. Thank you so much for doing this. Yeah, you're right. And again, I would encourage you to push just a little bit further and say, presenting evidence, right? But what kind of evidence is it? So yeah, positive view of Nightingale. But why is that exactly? Well, when you look at the things that these editors of her letters are presenting, it's all saying, yeah, she affected people for generations. Well, it was all of her post-war work, right? So it was her work around sanitary conditions for the Army, even in peacetime. It was nurse training, a cost accounting system, right? So they kind of say, hey, she's in the long run, she's this visionary doing all of this stuff. So what I would say here is, okay, so view number 2, these are the people who edited her letters. They're saying, you know, generations of contributions. Amazing. And what sorts of things are there? They're post-war. And we've got sanitation. We've got nurse training. And other stuff, right? So cost accounting. All right, great, neat. Okay, but again, what does it take to go from good to great on this stuff and really maximize your efficiency, maximize your effectiveness? What I would say is make sure you're digging into the why and asking yourself the question, okay, 2 points of view. The author's, we don't know what the author's point of view is yet, but we've got, number 1, we got this Summers character saying, overblown. Why? Because what she did in the war, not that big of a deal. Okay, then we got point of view 2. No, she was amazing. She affected generations of people. Why? What she did post-war. So now as we ask the question, how do these things connect? It's not just that we have Nightingale overrated, Nightingale great. We have very distinct types of evidence that say why. During the war, she wasn't that great. Second view, after the war, she was amazing. Okay, so that's the kind of connection you're looking for, is just to say, yep, post-war here, during the war here. All right, that's how the argument's getting set up. One more paragraph. Go ahead and take another minute on this, you guys. And again, really fight for those connections between paragraphs. Once you've got that, you're going to fly through the questions. And as always, pause if you need to. And again, live group, love to see the chatter. Keep it coming, you guys. Please, please, please. This is really interesting because I'm actually seeing some disagreement among the live group, and this is fascinating. And this is why we do this, to try to help you guys get better at drilling into exactly what's going on here. Because You can't both be right. Okay, author's point, which agrees with both publications. So that's one perspective from a live viewer. And again, thank you so much for weighing in, you guys. Right or wrong, the wronger you are, there we go, that's a word. The more wrong you are, actually, the more interesting it is. So, because if you're struggling, there are plenty of other people watching who are struggling. So thank you for this. So we have one that kind of says, yeah, the author kind of agrees with both of the other publications, both Summers and these editors of Nightingale's letters. And then we've got this. So she might not have achieved her goals. So Nightingale might not have achieved her goals, but she's in a good place in the minds of people. So the author is neutral. Okay. So we have maybe the author agrees with the first two. We have maybe the author's neutral. All right, let's see what we've got. Here's the argument I'd make here is I wouldn't say the author's neutral. I mean, look at that first sentence, right? So I believe that, I'm gonna make this a little bigger for a second here. Oh, that doesn't work, never mind. I believe the evidence, let me just get rid of myself for a moment. I believe that the evidence of her letters supports continued respect for her brilliance and creativity. I wouldn't say that's neutral. I don't think that's neutral at all, right? Like the author is kind of agreeing broadly with the editors, saying, yeah, there's evidence that she's brilliant, creative. So let's say, I would argue here, I mean, right there, you broadly have kind of point of view number 3. And this is going to be the author. And we'll say mostly agrees with number 2. So calls Nightingale brilliant, creative. Why? And what's the evidence that the author cites here? Well, the author's saying, okay, well, look at the things that Nightingale did that were way ahead of her time. So she was behaving basically as a modern educator would, as a modern social worker would. And now a couple of you pointed out that there's, and this is where I think I'm picking on you guys, and it's out of love. Thank you again for participating in this. So agrees with both publications. I see where you're getting it from, because if you look at that third and fourth line there, fourth line, I guess, in sum, although Nightingale may not have achieved her other goals, all of her goals during the Crimean War. Okay. But she was still amazing, right? So in a sense, in a very limited sense, the author is agreeing with Summers, with that first author, and saying, yeah, Nightingale didn't accomplish everything she wanted to in the Crimean War, but look at all of this amazing stuff she did after the war that had a huge impact. So in that sense, you're actually not totally off. I would say that she disagrees with Summers' broad conclusion that we see in that first paragraph. The broad conclusion, Nightingale was overrated. Author disagrees with that. Author's like, oh yeah, she deserves an eminent place. She's brilliant. She's creative. She's an eminent social pioneer. Author disagrees with the broad conclusions of Summers. She does agree with the point that the Crimean War wasn't quite the set of achievements for Nightingale that it's often claimed. So you're not so far off here, but you want to focus on, okay, why did the author write this? What's the author trying to convince us of? Author's trying to convince us she's brilliant, she's creative. What's the evidence? Again, this is post-war evidence. And it's kind of an education, social work, all of this post-war stuff where she says, hey, brilliant, creative, had a huge impact, eminent social pioneer. Yeah, what she did in the war wasn't that amazing. What she did after really was. So broad agreement here with this, even though the author is conceding the point that, yeah, maybe these war accomplishments were exaggerated. So she might concede that point, but big picture, the author's saying, no, Nightingale was amazing. Okay, so there we have it. That's how we can connect all 3 paragraphs. Go ahead and hop into that first question. We're going to do 2 questions on this one because I have a much harder passage we'll give you guys next. So go ahead and take a look at this one. Take a moment. And as always, live group, toss in your answer as soon as you've got one. If you're lost, please tell us that too. All right, take another moment if you need to. You need to pause, go for it. Okay, this is one of the longest, wordiest questions you'll ever see. But notice, if you did your work on the passage the right way, again, regardless of the type of passage, this is how we always want to analyze it. Always how to think through those connections, those points of view. Yes, more points of view than some passages have, but this is the same approach I always want to take. If you do that, if you invest well, if you do this nice and efficiently, nice and systematically, even this word soup of a question, it's going to go by super fast. So what does the author, with which of the following statements would the author most likely agree? Would the author agree with A, that Summers misunderstood the importance of Nightingale's achievements during the Crimean War and her subsequent influence? Nope. And as many of you pointed out in the live group, the author is not disagreeing about what happened in the Crimean War. Author does not disagree with Summers there. They're actually on the same page about the Crimean War. It's what happened after where they disagree. So A is out. B, the editors of Nightingale's letters made some valid points about the practical achievements, but still exaggerated. No, the author is very much on board with what the editors of the letters say. So there's no disagreement there. B is out for that reason. C, although Summers' account of Nightingale's role in the Crimean War may be accurate. There we go. That was that piece we were kind of talking about, where the author agreed a little bit with Summers in that part of it. Summers ignored Nightingale's subsequent achievement that suggests that a reputation as an eminent social reformer is well-deserved. That's spot on. Hang on to that one. D, the editors of Nightingale's letters mistakenly propagated, and by the way, in case you're new to our videos, I'm always going through all four. It's really, really, really easy to misread some little thing, fall in love with something, and make a mistake. Sometimes what happens is, I'll pretend that it happens now. Sometimes what happens is we might eliminate one more. Can't eliminate this one. We realize we misread C. So even though I really like C, this sounds like exactly what we want. I'm not stopping there, because what if I screwed up? I'm always going to eliminate 4 wrong answers, not 1 right answer. Reading, copy, and critical reasoning religiously, without exception. D, the editors of Nightingale's letters mistakenly propagated the outdated idealization of Nightingale that only, this is so far off, so there's nothing here where the author thinks the editors of the letters mistakenly did anything. D is out. E, the evidence of Nightingale's letters supports Summers' conclusions, both about the activities and about her influence. Nope. The whole thing is that the editors of the letters and Summers totally disagree, so E is out. But imagine that I looked at E and went, wait, I can't eliminate that. Then I'd have some more thinking to do, and it might be the case that I need to look at C again. So you'll notice I'm always going, okay, if I know that it's wrong and I can identify why it's wrong, I cross it out. Otherwise, I just keep it in. I'm never falling in love with anything. And again, in this case, E doesn't make sense either. And our answer is a very easy C. All right. One more question on this passage, and then we will wrap up and get to the harder passage. You're going to love it. All right, as always, pause if you need to. Otherwise, let's get back to it. Okay. Believe it or not, like I'm watching the live group, you guys don't seem to be struggling with this. This was a question that gets missed almost half the time statistically. So pretty interesting to see you guys in the live group not struggling. And again, what's the key to success on reading comprehension? If you invest wisely, systematically in the passage, you slice through the questions, that's where you save time. When people say, oh, I'm slow at reading comprehension, what's going on? Sometimes it's because you're a slow reader. That can be the case. We see that remarkably rarely. More often, what we see is it's not the right kind of investment in the passage, but then it's the questions where your time goes to that because you're back and forth, back and forth, back and forth because you're kind of hunting for the answer. But if you've done your work well, you don't have to do that. You're going to slice through it really, really quickly. That's what you want. So being good on the passage is what really saves you time. You might feel like you're spending extra time on the passage, but it's going to save you time in the long run because the questions will go so much faster. That extra 45 seconds or a minute being systematic here is going to save you a minute or two, or maybe more than that on the question, sometimes 3 or 4 minutes. All right, last paragraph. What's the author primarily concerned with? Is it A, summarizing arguments presented in the first 2 paragraphs? No. Author's not summarizing. Author takes a stand. A is out. B, refuting the view of Nightingale's career presented in the preceding paragraph? Nope. Kind of refutes maybe the first paragraph, agrees mostly with the second paragraph. So B is out. C, analyzing the weaknesses in the evidence presented elsewhere in the passage? Not at all. So the author in that last paragraph might disagree with Summers in the first paragraph, but the author is not attacking weaknesses in the evidence. The author is saying, no, actually, fair enough. Nightingale wasn't that amazing in the Crimean War. There's no attack on the evidence, which is why C is wrong. And by the way, this is the most commonly selected wrong answer for what it's worth. D, citing evidence to support a view of Nightingale's career. I mean, it seems too obvious to be the right answer, but sure, it's exactly what she's doing. She's talking about the modernization, the things she did where she operated as a modern, like a modern educator would, or as a modern social worker would. So there's evidence to support the author's view of how brilliant, creative, how much of a social pioneer Nightingale was. D seems like a perfect fit. I'm still going to read E and give it its due. Correcting a factual error occurring in one of the works under review, nothing at all there where the author disagreed with any of the facts presented by Summers or by the letter editor. So E is out. D is our winner. That's it. We made it through. You guys deserve a cookie. Okay, since no good deed goes unpunished. This next, I think I've threatened a few times. Second passage today, much tougher, my opinion. So yeah, it's just 2 paragraphs, but the points of view are much richer. I think the topic is a little bit less accessible for most people. All right, I'm gonna shut up now. Have at it. So yeah, first paragraph, usual drill. Take a look. Live group, let me know what you think. Let me know what your little kind of summary is. Let me know what you think of points of view, the author's purpose, and then we'll come back and analyze this one before we get to the second paragraph. As always, if you're not watching this live, if you need a little more time on this paragraph, please take it. I want to make sure you get your head around it before You come back and join the rest of the group. Live group, off we go. And I only get these sort of these handle names, and I don't see real names anymore. That's actually a change YouTube made not too long ago. So I'll try to pronounce this. Not so Suri. Thank you again for this, because you're getting at something here that I love. Why did I pick this? Why is point of view so important? One of the most common errors I see, again, from people who are smart, fundamentally good readers, fundamentally perfectly good at catching these, understanding what these sentences say, right? It can be so hard to pull apart the different points of view. Who exactly is saying what? So the argument I would make here is you've got Burckhardt, right? So who's this Burckhardt character? Okay, Burckhardt is saying Renaissance women, perfect equality. Okay, cool. And then Kelly's saying, no. And I think the word the author uses is that Kelly's view is dark. And Kelly is saying, no, the Renaissance was a period of decline for women relative to men and also relative to earlier women. Okay, great. So I agree with your first part of this here. It's about the views of Burckhardt and Kelly on whether women have a Renaissance or not, or whether the Renaissance kind of benefited women. But then the author says both works have been rejected by feminists because of generalizations they both made. You're actually right. I think maybe what I'd focus on here is, because you're right, the author does say that. I'd be very, very careful, and I'm splitting hairs here, and I think you might be in perfectly good shape. But what I want you to do on something like this is to go, let me make sure I'm 100% clear about who's saying what. And I always ask myself, again, even on a passage that's not as kind of filled with different points of view as this one is, even just on a normal passage, it's somebody just reporting on something in physics or plate tectonics or something that feels more factual, less opinion-based. I'm still always asking myself, does the author have a viewpoint? Does the author have a viewpoint? What's the author want from me? Here, I don't see the author's viewpoint. Not that you're suggesting. Again, I think your statement here is correct. But I would be careful. The mistake I most often see on this passage is that people start attributing one of the views mentioned to the author when it's not actually the author's view. Very common mistake. And again, not so Suri. I don't think you're doing that. But you're making me, some of your language there reminds me of the fact that many people do. Take the extra 20 seconds if you needed to say who exactly is saying what. All right, let's get this up on the board. Paragraph 1. What have I got? I got this Burckhardt guy. I'm just going to call him JB. He was a bartender for a lot of years. I had this bar regular named JB. He had very rosy cheeks. He drank a lot, and he happened to drink a scotch, a whiskey called J&B. So JB would come in and ask for his J&B on the rocks. And he had very rosy cheeks. Anyway, this guy actually has a rosy view, as luck would have it. That's basically, hey, there's perfect equality during the Renaissance. Oh, all right, okay. Well, that's point of view number 1. Point of view number 2, we got Kelly. And the author calls Kelly's view dark and is basically saying, yeah, it was actually a period of decline. So a period of decline for women. And then we've got kind of this this nice vague, they love this kind of thing, right? Feminist scholars. That's all it says. The feminist scholars have been mentioned, about who exactly? Well, maybe that's coming later, but this vague, some scholars believe, you say that language all the time in these. So who are these feminist scholars? What are they saying? We don't know who they are, but what are they saying? So we'll say the feminist scholars. And they're basically saying, hey, no. Kelly and JB, wrong, not cool, because they're overgeneralizing, because those generalizations they're making, that the opinions they have, it's complicated by these differences in social status and religion in particular. So oversimplification. So you oversimplified, and all these generalizations are complicated by social status. I'll just say status here, religion, maybe other things. So it says that those are the 2 big ones. Okay, 3 points of view. Isn't this fun? Author's point of view, very unclear. Author, is kind of lobbing some, author's got a little bit in there, kind of lobbing a couple of adjectives at these different commentators. But we have 3 points of view. JB saying, perfect equality, it was amazing. Feminist scholars love to refute that. Kelly's one of them. Kelly's saying, no, period of decline was terrible. And then these other scholars are coming in and saying, whoa. Too simple, you're overgeneralizing. When you really start to think about sort of the diversity of different women in this period, you start thinking about different social status, different religion, you're not going to come to such clean conclusions. Okay, great. A lot to sort through. Again, if you cut that investment short, if you make this too glib, make it a little bit too, I don't know, you don't pay enough attention to the third point of view, you impute something to the author that the author didn't really say, that's when you're going to really struggle on the questions. Probably going to struggle on the second paragraph too. So again, it's always about making that wise investment, not memorizing every fact, but just going, okay, how's this structured? What does the author want? What's the author doing? Author's giving us 3 points of view. That's already a lot to sift through. If we have those straight, we're good. We can move on to the next paragraph. Let's do that. How about it? Last paragraph, it's a beast. I'll give you guys a couple minutes. And as always, I know a broken record here, really focus on how does this connect to the previous one? That's going to be the magic on this particular passage. And apologies for the interruption. Just for the live group, if your head's spinning, if you're struggling, please just pop that in the chat. I just kind of want a quick temperature check. How are you finding this passage? And I'll give you about 20 more seconds and we'll jump in. As always, pause if you need to. And again, live group, please don't be shy. I see a couple people kind of tell me what they think. My star student here, that's pretty good, pretty good. I like it. We'll get into some more of the nuances, but I think that's, yeah, I think that's pretty solid start. Rest of you, if you're getting your head knocked off by this, please let me know. That helps to make it better for everybody. If I can kind of, I think this is tough. If you guys are nailing it and just not saying anything, that's interesting to know. If you find it really, really hard and it's too much, please let me know that as well. I love the feedback. I'm used to one-on-one tutoring. I'm used to talking to people even years later, 8-9 years into doing YouTube videos. I'm still not used to just one way, not getting a lot of feedback. So I thrive off the feedback. Chatter at me, live group, talk trash, whatever. Makes me happy. All right. So again, really, really, really tough. And yeah, thank you for that. I think it's tough. One small mindset thing before we really dive into the substance of this paragraph. The little mindset thing, I don't want you to be intimidated by length. Every GMAT question is basically meant to be doable in the same amount of time. So if you see a paragraph and you go, whoa, this is dense, this passage is going to take me forever, I don't want you to think that way because that will be offset in some other way. So, hey, dense paragraph, well, look, there's only 2 of them, so there's not that much to read. A long passage in general, well, odds are good those questions are going to be questions that you can slice through faster. So don't get intimidated by it. Don't let timing get into your head. Make your investment in the passage, make it systematically, and I promise good things will happen in the long run. And again, I'm really challenging you guys on this one. I think this is a really, really, really tough paragraph, really tough passage in general. So we've already got 3 points of view, and we haven't heard from the author yet. That's just off the first paragraph. Now we've got a specific feminist scholar. So a feminist scholar is mentioned up here. And where was the author going with it? The author was saying, okay, well, what are we saying about those feminist scholars? Those scholars were saying that these very kind of, maybe not extremist, but very clean views, dark view, rosy view by JB and Kelly. Well, no, it's complicated by social status, by religion. What's a little funky here, I think, and hard for some people to pick up on this second paragraph, the trend is also evident, however, in works focusing on those middle and upper class European women whose ability to write gives them disproportionate representation in the historical record. And then we get into Tina Krontiris and her views on it. But she's not exactly the same as the feminist scholars. And that's part of the point of this first sentence, right? So when these feminist scholars are interested in the differences in social status, so not just upper class Italian women who are the ones who are usually studied, you sort of get this idea that, well, these generalizations are unfair. Well, what's the author saying here? Well, that trend is still evident, even when we still focus on those upper class women, because who could write in the Renaissance? Which women could write? Upper class women. They were the only ones writing. So, okay. So this trend in paragraph 2, so this trend kind of meaning we want to focus on not overgeneralizing. So these non-extreme views, the reality is somewhere in between what Rosie, JB, and what Dark Kelly said. So that trend towards kind of avoiding the generalizations, well, that continues even when we're focused just on the upper class women. We'll say even with just the upper class. All right, so then we get this commentator. So point of view number 4, we've got Krontiris. And what is she saying? So she's cautiously optimistic. And she's essentially saying, yeah, hey, there's some achievements. So Renaissance women make some achievements, they make some strides, but they also face these social obstacles. So we'll say there's achievements, but there's also social obstacles. And again, kind of saying, hey, it's nuanced. It's not all rosy, it's not all dark. Even though she's focused on just upper class women, hey, the reality is somewhere in between. Here's where there were achievements, here's where there was progress, but here's the social obstacles. What does the author think? So we're at 4 points of view. JB, Kelly, feminist scholars in general. Krontiris, who mostly agrees with those feminist scholars, but is coming at it from a slightly different direction, as in she's not engaged in differences in social status. She's just studying upper class women. That's for Krontiris. And then we've got the author. What does the author think? Well, the author has a pretty strong pretty strong opinion on Krontiris, right? She's saying it's a fascinating study. Great. And there's significant contributions. But she also says, hey, it conflates women with women writers. So she's not saying, oh, Krontiris is right about everything, and this is amazing. It's a fascinating study. It's got some contributions. But also saying that she conflates women with writers, with women writers. So she's got her hesitation. So the author's saying, I don't know if the author's male or female. The author's saying, yeah, Krontiris isn't perfect, kind of conflates, rich women with all women, and that's a little weird. But fundamentally, the study's really fascinating. And she's bringing up a bunch of things that are really important, and it gets into more of those details in that very last paragraph. All right. Tough passage. And again, I picked this one because it is the poster child for dizzying amounts of points of view. We've got 5. JB, we got Kelly. We got feminist scholars in general. We got Frontieres, who agrees with those feminist scholars, but a little bit different. And then we got the author that has some critiques of Frontieres. Woo! Fun times. But that should be enough to get us somewhere, right? So the author is kind of saying, hey, this is fascinating. We get into the nuances of what's really going on with these women. The study could be better in some ways, but hey, we're learning some cool stuff. Neat. Okay, let's do some questions. Got 3 of them here for this one. Going to tackle that first one, take a moment or two. Don't be shy, live group. As soon as you have an answer, pop it in. Give it about 10 more seconds. And if you're lost, just stick a question mark in there. All right. And again, statistically, a really, really tough question. People get beat up pretty badly by all of the questions in this passage. So if you're struggling, no shame in that. So author of the passage discusses Frontieres, primarily providing an example of a writer who does what. A is highly critical of the writings of certain Renaissance women. No, Frontieres isn't criticizing the writings of any of these Renaissance era women. She's just analyzing them. So definitely not A. B, supports Kelly's view of women's status during the Renaissance. Well, again, if we've paid attention to anything, again, there's a lot of nuance in this passage, a lot of tough stuff that is really difficult to grasp. But a very, very basic thing is, yeah, Kelly, this really kind of relatively extreme view that hey, everything was dark and terrible. Frontieres would not agree with that. So B is out. C has misinterpreted the works of certain Renaissance women. No, the author really likes, look at all the stuff the author was saying. The author's saying that Frontieres' study was fascinating and it was significant contributions and it was great. So I'm not saying that Frontieres misinterpreted anything. D has rejected the views of both Burckhardt and Kelly. Sure. Yeah, I guess, right? I mean, that's what happens sometimes on reading comprehension, right? You put all this work in and you're like, well, okay, yeah, I guess. I mean, that's kind of the whole thing is that nobody really agrees. Nobody here agrees with JB and Kelly. Nobody agrees with Burckhardt and Kelly because they're too extreme. Some feminist scholars come out of one direction. Frontieres is one of those that kind of says, well, even if we look at just the rich women, we're still not going to take sides with Kelly or JB. There's not enough nuance there. It's overgeneralization. So yeah, I guess so. Yeah. Doesn't really feel like it captures what we just did, but sure. E has studied Renaissance women in a wide variety of social and religious contexts. No, that was this whole, there wasn't necessarily a lot of difference between Frontieres and these feminist scholars up here, but those feminist scholars were saying, no, JB and Kelly overcomplicate or oversimplify. They have these generalizations because once you study women in other contexts other than upper class women, when you look at differences in social status and religion, you come to a different answer. What did Frontieres do? Well, Frontieres was focused on just the upper class women and still came to this conclusion that JB and Kelly were not right. So Frontieres actually didn't study the Renaissance women in a wide variety of social and religious contexts. She was focused just on these rich literate women as well. So Frontieres did not do that. Some of these other feminist scholars did. Really subtle thing that E is out. And D is unsatisfying. Do you like D? Do I feel compelled by it? No. It felt like we worked way too hard to get to that lame answer. And what I think happens for a lot of people on this, again, this question's a bloodbath statistically. I think a lot of people reject D because it seems too obvious. Also, a lot of people embrace E because it feels right. But if you've done your job with the passage and you really thought systematically about point of view, 5 points of view here, and really identifying, okay, what are these feminist scholars saying? What is Quantiris saying? What are they doing? What's different? That's where this question becomes a great deal easier. And yeah, don't just because an answer choice feels unsatisfying or it feels like you didn't have to work for it. I feel like you have to think harder about all the wrong answers here than the right answer. The right answer is like, well, that's dumb. You're gonna have that feeling a lot on the GMAT. You get a lot on data insights too. That is not uncommon. Don't get inside your head. If the answer is right, if it's supported, if you can point to evidence that it's right, run with it. Take the gift. Because I see a lot of people rejecting these overly obvious answers. Yeah, but it's right. I mean, Quantiris disagreed with JB and Kelly. Absolutely. Okay. Question number 2. Have fun. All right, pause if you need to. Okay, and again, if you guys are struggling, no shame in it at all. Statistically, really, really tough question. All of them are on this passage pretty much. According to the passage, Quantiris's work differs from that of the scholars mentioned in the highlighted text, these feminist scholars, in which the following ways. A, Quantiris's work, and by the way, this is one of those questions where if we're really paying attention to point of view, we kind of have the answer potentially already, because that's a lot of what we already engaged with as we thought through everybody's point of view. These feminist scholars and Quantiris broadly agree about some things, right? They agree that JB and Kelly were too simple in their analysis or in their conclusions. It's not all rosy, it's not all dark, it's somewhere in between. You can't make these generalizations. But these feminist scholars were focused, the evidence they used was based on studying a wider variety of women. So they were saying, yeah, if you start thinking more about women who are not just upper class women, look at the very end of that first paragraph, and you start thinking about women with a different social status, women with different religion, you're not going to come to these really clean conclusions that JB and Kelly get. And then Quantiris might say, yeah, you're not coming to those conclusions that JB and Kelly came to, but she got there even just studying rich women who could write, even though her sample was based on just these rich, privileged women. She came to the same conclusions as these feminist scholars, but they got there a little bit differently. And pretty subtle thing, right? But again, if we're really focused on point of view, wait, we're mentioning different people here. Do they do anything differently? Do they think differently? Again, if we did all that work up front, which we did, this shouldn't be too bad. A, Quantiris's work stresses the achievements of Renaissance women rather than the obstacles. No, remember, part of what, so what Quantiris is focused on is this cautious optimism about the status of Renaissance women, right? So she focuses on, yes, achievements. She also focuses on the social obstacles. So those are there for her, certainly. And as you get into sort of what the author's saying in that last sentence, that the opposition to cultural stereotypes was highly circumscribed, meaning very constrained, that the women could rarely attack the assumptions in the ideologies that oppressed them. So there were limits, right? So cautiously optimistic, women had some achievements, but they couldn't completely break through in the ways that maybe Kelly would have thought. So Contreras is definitely focused on both the obstacles and the achievements. So it is not A. B, Contreras' work is based on a reinterpretation of the work of earlier scholars. Not at all. She's looking at stuff from these women writers. It's not B. C, Contreras' views are at odds with those of Kelly and Burckhardt. Yes, her views are at odds, but that's not a difference between Contreras and these feminist scholars. Their views don't differ. It's their methods that differ. What kind of women were they studying? So it is not C. That's not actually a difference between them. D, Contreras' work focuses on the place of women in Renaissance society. That's what everybody's talking about here. This is ridiculous. You know, sometimes they just need one more answer choice, and that's what they came up with. Good job, GMAT. Thanks for giving us a free one to cross out. And I hope we like E. Were Contreras' views based exclusively on the study of a privileged group of women? Yeah, and that's kind of the whole difference, right? So Contreras is a good example of the same views that these feminist scholars held, but she got there with this narrow little sample that the author actually criticizes, right? This narrow little sample of privileged women who were literate. So E is our answer. All right, you guys having fun? Got time for one more. Do we have time for one more? Let me see if we can get through this last one really quickly, because I like to finish by the top of the hour. All right, go for it. We'll go pretty quickly here. All right, we're going to jump right in the interest of time here. So according to the passage, feminist scholars, and by the way, so we only have 2 minutes left. If you enjoyed this, smash that like button, follow, subscribe, all that stuff. We're going to be here every Friday for a little while. So if you enjoyed this, please invite your friends. Let us know what you want to see in these videos. Got a few more for Reading Comp, about 5 more in this series, probably, depending on what you guys want. You guys drive the bus. So tag me at GMATClub, tag me here on YouTube at GMAT Ninja Tutoring if there's something you want to see. All right. 90 seconds, we'll get through this. According to the passage, feminist scholars cite Burckhardt's view of Renaissance women primarily for the following reasons. Well, Burckhardt's JB here. Oh, perfect equality. So these feminist scholars just want to pound him, right? That's what it says in the first sentence. They're out to refute it. This guy says something that they see as idiotic. Let's pound him. All right. A, his view, JB's view, forms the basis for most arguments refuting Kelly's point of view. That doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make any sense. Burckhardt's view has been discredited by Kelly. Yes, but that's not why people want to mention it. Burckhardt and Kelly disagree, but these feminist scholars disagree with Kelly too. So B is out. C, Burckhardt's view is one that many feminist scholars wish to refute. Absolutely. Basically said in the first sentence. Kind of everything that follows is, yeah, it's fun to look at how ridiculous that is. That's kind of an undercurrent throughout it. D, Burckhardt's work provides rich historical evidence of the inequality. No, it's the opposite, right? This JB guy thinks that they're equal. D is out. And E, Burckhardt's work includes historical research supporting the arguments of feminist scholars. No. Feminist scholars disagree with him. That's kind of the whole point. So C is our winner. All right, guys, if you made it through, congratulations. Tough stuff this week. I'm going to keep challenging you in the future videos. Again, anything you want to see, tag me at GMAT Ninja Tutoring here on GMATClub at GMAT Ninja at GMAT Ninja on GMATClub at GMAT Ninja Tutoring here on YouTube. And yeah, we'll see you next week. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Have fun studying.